What if everything you thought you knew about Roman sexuality was only half the story? We imagine marble statues, noble senators, and grand arenas. But scratched into the crumbling walls of Pompeii are words and drawings that reveal a side of Rome most textbooks leave out: a not-so-secret world of same-sex desire. Was it just dirty jokes from bored citizens? Or open expressions of love and lust that society accepted far more than we think? Did the graffiti reflect real relationships, or simply the humor of a city that lived fast and died suddenly under volcanic ash? You're about to see what 2,000-year-old graffiti really says, and it may change how you picture daily life in ancient Rome. Before we dive in, drop a comment. With the time you're watching this morning, midnight doesn't matter, we see you. And if you enjoy the history most channels are too cautious to touch, consider subscribing. No pressure. But here, we bring the hidden walls back to life. Ready to read the secrets of Pompeii? Let's begin. The walls of Pompeii don't feel silent at all. When you look closely, they're full of scratches and notes, almost like a giant notebook that never got erased. Imagine walking down those ancient streets, dust under your feet, broken houses around you, and suddenly you see words carved into the plaster. Not from tourists last year, but from people who lived here 2,000 years ago. Some are as simple as, "So-and-so was here." It's the same kind of thing. People write on bathroom stalls today, or carve into a school desk when they're bored. Except here, everyone could see it in broad daylight. Bakers' kids, rich folks, and travelers. And instead of being frowned on, it was normal. Writing on walls was part of daily life. In a way, it was their version of social media. You see shopping lists, political slogans, even quick reminders about gladiator fights. Then mixed in, there are funny insults and little love notes. It's as if someone left their phone unlocked, and you could read both the grocery app and the late-night texts. The walls show no filter, just daily life, with all its mix of serious and silly. One inscription sighs dramatically. "Girls cry for me. My boyfriend has left." Another says, "Floronius is a great gladiator, only for someone else to scratch underneath. No, he's not." That's pure internet comment section. Energy except in Latin, and written with a sharp tool instead of a keyboard. It's not just what they wrote, but who might have written it. You can picture a baker doodling while waiting for bread to rise, or a soldier carving a joke after too much wine. Some words are misspelled, others rushed, but none of that mattered. What mattered was leaving your mark. They didn't care if it looked polished. They just wanted someone to read it. The location of each graffiti adds another layer. In quiet corners, you'll find nasty insults, almost like whispered gossip. Near the marketplace, there are ads or fans cheering for gladiators. Inside homes, guests sometimes carved little notes on the entryway, like leaving a review nice host, or sometimes, "This guy knows nothing." Not exactly 5 stars. As you walk through, it doesn't feel like ruins. It feels like you're scrolling through a frozen feed of ancient voices. The volcano made sure these words couldn't be erased, almost like nature itself decided they were worth keeping. So when you read something like "A Timidus got me pregnant," you're not just seeing history. You're hearing someone's personal story stuck on a wall for centuries. It makes you think the things we write today online on paper, even in quick text messages, what if some of those survive 2,000 years from now? What will they say about us? You turn the corner and realize the walls aren't just covered in dramatic love lines or gossip. A lot of the graffiti is surprisingly ordinary notes about food, money, and daily business. Think about how you sometimes jot a reminder on a sticky note or type something quick into your phone. The people of Pompeii didn't have sticky notes, so the wall became the easiest place to write. One message is basically a shopping list. Bread, wine, oil. Another records a debt. So-and-so owes me 20 denarii. You can almost picture someone muttering while scratching the words, making sure they wouldn't forget. It's funny because we imagine the Romans as marble statues and grand emperors, but here they are arguing about who owes who lunch money. And then there are announcements. Gladiator fights were the blockbuster movies of the Roman world, and people made sure to carve little posters into the walls. You'll see things like, on the 3rd of July in the amphitheater, come watch the fight of Octus. It's not so different from seeing flyers for a football match today, except instead of paper that blows away in the wind, they carve the ad right into the plaster for everyone to see. You also notice jokes hidden among these everyday notes. Someone wrote, "If anyone sits here, may they get boils." That's the ancient version of, "Don't sit in my spot." Another wrote, a quick insult about a neighbor's cooking. Can't you almost hear the laughter in a crowded kitchen when people noticed it? What stands out is how normal the mix feels. The same walls that carry insults also carry prayers, like, "I beg Venus to bless my love." Right next to a sacred plea, you might find a doodle of a gladiator with a sword. Pompeii wasn't neat and tidy in how it separated things. It threw everything together, just like our own lives. Imagine standing inside a tavern in Pompeii. The floor smells faintly of spilled wine, the chatter is loud, and someone at the table leans back and starts carving into the plaster. He might record his win in a dice game, or maybe complain that the wine was watered down. 2,000 years later, you're reading it, and you can almost feel that smoky room around you. It makes you realize that graffiti wasn't just decoration. It was a way of talking to the city. If you didn't have a diary, if you didn't own books, you could still scratch your thoughts somewhere permanent. These walls became the memory of the people, a memory so durable it outlasted their houses, their families, even the empire itself. And when you compare it to today, it hits you how little has changed. We still use public spaces, online feeds, comment sections, subway walls to tell the world we were here, to joke, to complain, to brag. The difference is we can hit delete. Pompeii's people couldn't. Their words stayed. After laughing at the jokes and daily reminders, you start noticing something softer. On many walls, hidden among the insults and gladiator ads, there are words of affection, short, almost shy lines like tiny love notes carved into stone. They aren't long poems. They're quick scratches, the kind you'd leave on a desk at school or send in a text message. One inscription says simply, "I love the girl from next door." Another, "Cornelius loves Julia." Sometimes the names aren't even given, just the emotion. "I burn with love," one person wrote without saying who it was for. It's strange how 2,000 years later, you can feel the same heat, the same ache, as if the wall itself remembers. You lean in closer to another one. "Whoever loves, may they fare well. Let him perish who does not love." That one almost sounds like a chant a mix between a blessing and a curse. You picture someone carving it after a night of frustration, hoping the gods were listening. And it wasn't always about happy feelings. One message complains Restitutus has often deceived many girls. Another moans, Crescens is unfaithful. Suddenly, you're not just reading about love, but about heartbreak, jealousy, betrayal. It feels raw. The same kind of thing people post on social media today when they can't help venting about a breakup. Some inscriptions are surprisingly tender. Successus loves Iris. May she love him back. You almost want to stop and hope she did. Did Iris ever read those words? Did she smile or roll her eyes? These walls don't tell you the ending. They freeze the story mid-scene. You might ask yourself, why write love notes on a wall? Why not keep it private? But in Pompeii, privacy wasn't the same as today. A wall could be both a diary and a stage. Writing a name into plaster wasn't just confession. It was a public claim. A way of saying, look, this is real, and I want the whole city to know it. And then there are the lines that blur even more. One inscription says Myrtus loves Philoxenus, who doesn't care. Another flips the angle. Methe loves Crestus, but he loves another. The graffiti starts to sound like overlapping conversations, like everyone shouting over each other at a crowded party. You can almost imagine the walls themselves shaking with the noise. You think about how little has changed. We still carve hearts into tree trunks, scribble names into notebooks, send songs to someone we secretly like. The methods change, but the impulse doesn't. People in Pompeii wanted to be seen in their love, even if that love wasn't returned. And maybe that's why these scratches hit so deeply. They're not marble statues or epic poems written by emperors. They're the voices of regular people who just wanted to say, I love someone, or I've been hurt. Simple, short, messy, and very human. What if everything you thought you knew about Roman love was wrong? You've heard the stories. Emperors with mistresses, poets chasing women's statues of Venus and Cupid everywhere. But on the walls of Pompeii, another truth shows up: men writing about men, carving their feelings openly into plaster without trying to hide it. You bend close to one scratched line, I am amazed wall, that you have not fallen down, since you bear so many writers' burdens. A joke, sure. But then, nearby, another voice cuts in, with something different. Marcellus loves his boy. No attempt to disguise it, no shame in putting it where everyone walking past could read. To a modern ear, that might sound surprising. We often think of the past as conservative, rigid, or silent about same-sex desire. But Pompeii shows otherwise. For the Romans, relationships between men weren't exactly a secret. They joked about it, boasted about it, argued over it, just as they did about everything else. You picture a crowded bathhouse, steam rising, voices echoing. On the wall, someone carves a line, I wish I could kiss you, Publius. It's not flowery poetry. It's quick, direct, personal. Another wall tells of someone mocking a rival for being too much with the boys. Was it an insult? Probably. But even the insult proves how common the idea was. It wasn't always about romance either. Some graffiti is playful, almost like locker room banter. Take care, wall, you have been written on by so many lovers. Or Secundus loves men. You can imagine a group of young men laughing, scratching that into the plaster, like modern friends tagging each other online. Of course, the Romans had their own rules. Status mattered. Being the pursuer, or the one in control, was seen differently than being the one pursued. Graffiti sometimes reflects that turning affection into bragging rights or taunts. But behind the power games, there's still something very human, people carving their desire into the walls because they couldn't hold it inside. Think about this. When you walk past graffiti today that says, "Tom loves Chris," you probably smile and keep moving. In Pompeii, people did the same thing. These words weren't hidden in secret notebooks. They were out in the open, part of daily life. The city itself became the witness. And the fact that you're standing here 2,000 years later, reading those scratches, proves something important. These voices didn't vanish. They survived volcanoes, time, and centuries of silence. Whatever people might have thought was forbidden, the walls remembered anyway. As you keep following the trail of words, the tone shifts. Not every line is tender or dreamy. Some graffiti is sharp-biting, meant to sting. Insults about love, lives, jokes about partners, even mockery about how someone behaved in bed. The walls of Pompeii were not just diaries, they were also weapons. You stop at one carving that basically says, "Marcus is lazy in love." Another calls someone out for being soft. The message isn't sweet, it's designed to humiliate. And it worked because anyone walking past could see it. Imagine if someone today wrote a nasty tweet about you and nailed it to the door of your favorite cafe. That's the kind of public shaming Pompeii's graffiti could deliver. Roman society put a lot of value on reputation. If you were mocked on a wall, that shame could follow you everywhere. For men especially, being teased about weakness or being taken advantage of was a blow to their status. In a culture built on honor, graffiti was like a little knife that kept cutting every time someone read it. At the same time, it could be playful. One wall boasts Epaphra is not good at ball games. Another says Lucius cheated at dice. You can almost hear the laughter as friends pointed it out. The line between joke and insult was thin. Sometimes it was probably all in good fun, sometimes not. And then there's the really personal stuff. One wall reads, "Gaius loves a boy, but the boy laughs at him." That's not just a statement, it's a jab, the kind that could spread quickly. It tells you that graffiti was part of a social game. To write something on a wall wasn't just about self-expression, it was about shaping someone's image, lifting yourself up, or dragging someone else down. This wasn't unique to Pompeii. In other Roman towns, similar graffiti shows up. Even famous writers like Catullus and Martial filled their poems with insults, jokes, and scandalous lines. If poets could do it in verse, ordinary people did it in plaster. You can't help but think of how little has changed. Online today, reputation can be destroyed with a few words. In Pompeii, all it took was a stylus and a wall. And unlike the internet, where posts can be deleted, Pompeian insults were carved to last. Imagine walking by every day and seeing that mocking line about you still there unchanged. Brutal right so. As you trace your fingers over those scratches, you realize Pompeii wasn't just a city of laughter and love. It was also a city where people weaponized words where shame was as permanent as stone. You leave behind the petty insults and move toward walls that carry a different kind of voice, this time mixing the sacred with the cheeky. Pompeii's graffiti didn't stop at names or taunts. It often pulled the gods into the joke. Imagine praying to Jupiter one moment and then carving a line about him the next. For the Romans, the line between piety and play was surprisingly thin. On one wall, you see the name of Priapus, the god of fertility, protector of gardens and households. In art, he's usually shown holding a giant basket of fruit, or sometimes something else that made people snicker even in ancient times. In Pompeii, people scribbled jokes about him, or asked for his blessing in love. You can almost imagine neighbors chuckling as they passed by. Then there are the satyrs, wild, playful creatures from mythology, half human and always chasing fun. Their images show up on frescoes, and sometimes in scratched drawings too. They reminded people that passion, even the mischievous kind, was part of life. The graffiti carried that same energy, like the walls themselves were joining in the laughter of myth. But it wasn't just jokes. Some graffiti asked the gods for help. "I beg Venus to bless my love," one inscription pleads. Another calls on Mercury, hoping for luck in business or romance. People didn't see the gods as far away. They were part of daily life, just as present in a tavern wall as in a temple. You think about how strange it might seem to us today. Imagine if someone wrote on a cafe wall, "God, please make Sarah text me back." You'd probably laugh. But in Pompeii, those prayers mixed right in with insults and grocery lists. The divine and the ordinary lived side by side without separation. Some graffiti even mocked the gods lightly. "Jupiter is a drinker," one line teases. Was it meant seriously? Probably not, but it shows how comfortable people felt blending reverence with humor. The gods weren't untouchable, they were part of the conversation. And sometimes the graffiti itself became a little stage play. One person might write a prayer, and another respond beneath it with a sarcastic remark. Almost like a thread of comments today, except carved permanently into stone. It turns the wall into a dialogue between the sacred and the silly, with the gods as both audience and punchline. So, as you stand there reading these lines, you get the sense that religion in Pompeii wasn't just about temples and rituals. It was woven into daily chatter, into scratches on plaster. People called on the gods to bless their love-cursed rivals in the gods' names, or poked fun at divine figures. For them, the holy and the humorous weren't separate worlds. They were two sides of the same coin. What if I told you the juiciest gossip wasn't whispered at all? It was carved, right where everyone gathered. When you step into Pompeii's taverns, bathhouses, and bedrooms, the graffiti gets louder, sharper, and far more personal. These places were the hot spots where people mixed food, drink, pleasure, and chatter, and the walls soaked it all in. Picture a busy tavern, the smell of bread and wine thick in the air. A drunk patron leans back, stylus in hand, and carves "Cornelius loves Syrah." The next morning, half the town could read it while buying breakfast. Taverns were more than just bars. They were the bulletin boards of scandal, each scratch on the wall spreading a story faster than gossip over a cup of wine. Now, move with me into the bathhouse. Steam fills the air. echoes bounce off stone walls, and dozens of people pass through every day. On one wall, someone scribbles a complaint about a rival, on another, a confession of love. The bath wasn't just about washing. It was a social hub where secrets slipped out, and the plaster remembered them all. If you think of a modern gym locker room with Sharpie tags on the walls, you've got the right picture. Bedrooms, too, had their share of graffiti. Guests sometimes scratched lines on the plaster while visiting, leaving behind a mark for the homeowner and anyone else to see. Imagine waking up to find a friend had carved Nice Place, but the wine was bad, right by your bed. Some messages were lighter romantic boasts, cheeky jokes, but others were biting shaming the host or mocking their guests. And then there were the brothels. Pompeii's most famous brothel still has graffiti that lists names, praises workers, or even keeps a running tally of visits. It wasn't secretive. It was part of the entertainment. Think of it like Yelp reviews scratched into the wall, except a little more personal. Each of these spaces, tavern, bath, bedroom, brothel, was like a stage where people performed their desires, complaints, and reputations. And the walls turned into the audience recording every act. That's why when you read them now, you feel like you're eavesdropping on conversations that never ended. It makes you wonder if someone carved graffiti in your favorite cafe, your gym, or even your bedroom wall. What story would it tell about you? You notice something as you keep reading the walls. Not every carving is a love note or a silly joke. Some reveal the way Romans thought about rules, status, and what was acceptable. Pompeii's graffiti becomes less like random chatter and more like a mirror of Roman society where affection was one thing, but reputation and law decided whether it was safe to express it. In Roman culture, being the active partner in a relationship, whether with women or men, was seen as fine, even respectable. But being the passive one, especially if you were a man, carried stigma. Graffiti often mocked men accused of taking that role, not because of love itself, but because of how it flipped the social hierarchy. Romans cared about power control and honor far more than about who loved whom. One scratched line might brag, "I took so-and-so last night," the words written like a victory banner. Another would sneer, "This man is everyone's plaything," which wasn't about romance at all, but about shaming someone's reputation. You realize that love and desire weren't judged only by feeling, they were judged by where you stood in the social ladder. It went beyond private life. Roman law actually punished certain relationships, but not in the way you might expect. A freeborn Roman citizen was supposed to maintain dignity. If he acted in ways society saw as losing control, he risked being ridiculed or even legally targeted. Meanwhile, relationships with slaves or lower status partners often slipped under the radar because the balance of power was preserved. Does that sound unfair? Absolutely. But it shows how Romans didn't separate love from power. For them, the two were glued together. And the graffiti, with its mix of boasts and insults, made sure everyone remembered those rules. You're left with the feeling that these walls weren't neutral. They judged, they scolded, and they laughed. They carried not only the words of ordinary people, but also the weight of Roman society's unwritten code. When you reach the end of Pompeii's streets, the air feels heavier. Not because of smoke or ash now, but because of what you realize all these words only survived because disaster froze them in place. If Vesuvius hadn't erupted, the walls would have been painted over, crumbled, or rebuilt. The eruption buried the city, and with it every joke, every insult, every confession. But in doing so, it accidentally kept them safe for you to read 2,000 years later. You picture the day it happened. People running, shouting, trying to escape as ash and pumice rained down. Houses collapsed, roofs caught fire, and yet the scratches in the plaster endured. It's almost eerie, like the mountain itself decided to preserve the gossip of a city forever. When archaeologists began digging in the 18th century, they were stunned. At first, they expected grand temples, treasures, and statues. What they found instead were walls full of messy handwriting. Imagine the surprise. You travel back in time, through excavation, and instead of marble speeches from emperors, you get Marcus loves Julia and I was here. In a way, those words felt more alive than any statue. Many scholars were embarrassed at first. Some graffiti was too bold, too personal, too direct. For years, certain inscriptions were locked away in special collections hidden from the public. The official excuse was protecting morality, but the truth is simple. The graffiti revealed things about Roman life people didn't want to admit. Love between men, open mockery of neighbors, prayers mixed with jokes. None of it fit the polished image of a noble Rome. But time has a way of shifting what we value. Today, historians see the graffiti as one of the most honest records of daily life. Unlike official inscriptions on monuments, these weren't filtered. They weren't polished by senators or poets. They were written by bakers, soldiers, barmaids, slaves, ordinary people who usually vanish from history books. You think about how powerful that is. Without the eruption, without the preservation, we might never have known what these people thought, loved, or laughed at. The eruption destroyed their city, but gave them a strange kind of immortality. Their houses are gone, their bodies long dust, but their words still reach you clearly. And when you stand there reading them, you don't feel like you're looking at ruins. You feel like you're listening in on conversations that only paused mid-sentence. The city is gone, but the walls kept talking. What if the voices carved into Pompeii's walls aren't just about the past, but about us too? You've walked through their streets, read their jokes, their heartbreaks, their prayers, their insults, and now you can't help but see the connection. These people lived 2,000 years ago, but their words sound like something you might read online today. Think about it. Someone brags about love. Someone else mocks them. Another leaves a dramatic cry of heartbreak, and another carves a private prayer in a public place. Isn't that just a comment thread? Isn't that just Twitter, Instagram, or your group chat? The tools have changed, but the human need to be seen to leave a trace hasn't. And that's the surprising lesson Pompeii's graffiti gives you. History isn't made only by emperors or generals. It's made by ordinary people writing whatever came to mind in the moment. Messy, funny. Sometimes cruel. Sometimes tender. They weren't trying to be remembered, but they were. You think about one particular line. Successus loves. Iris, may she love him back. It's so simple, but it echoes louder than all the grand speeches of Rome, because it's personal, because it's real. It's a reminder that love in all its forms has always existed, whether celebrated, mocked, or whispered on the walls of a doomed city. The graffiti also reminds you that society's debates about love and identity aren't new. They've been going on for thousands of years. The Romans had their own rules, their own judgments, their own humor, and yet they still left behind proof that desire couldn't be erased even if people tried to hide it. And here you are, centuries later, listening to those voices in the quiet. Maybe it makes you smile. Maybe it makes you think. But one thing is certain. The walls of Pompeii are still speaking. They're telling us that love, in every shape and form, has always been part of the human story. So as you close your eyes tonight, let the whispers of those ancient walls stay with you. Not as ruins, not as cold stone, but as echoes of real people who laughed, cried, and loved just like you. In Pompeii's graffiti, you discovered the raw voices of ordinary Romans, love notes, insults, prayers, and bold confessions, scratched into plaster proof that human desire and humor never really change. These walls remind us that history isn't only emperors and battles, but everyday people leaving their mark. Yet graffiti was just one layer of Roman life. If you follow the trail further, it leads into another world entirely. The dark side of Roman pleasure orgies, banquets, and dangerous excess. If a city can flirt, Rome does it with half-open doors and a flicker of oil light. And tonight, you learn that pleasure here isn't a feeling. It's a floor plan you walk through while the street hums under your sandals. You move along Vicus Tuscus, where shutters close like eyelids, then drift toward the Suburra, that tangle of tenements and taverns where gossip outruns the Tiber after rain. The paving stones keep the day's warmth. The air mixes olive smoke perfume and a jar of garum someone forgot to seal. Ever wondered how a city can smell expensive and rowdy at once? You're smelling it now. A patrol from the vigils clinks past, spear tapping a rhythm more ceremonial than strict. He pretends not to see the small knot of guests ahead who pretend not to notice him back. Everyone knows the choreography look casual. Pay the right household slave, say the right name at the right door. Reputation is a currency. Silence is small change. At the corner, a domus shows off bronze-studded panels. The ostiarius sits by the threshold like a human hinge. He glances at a wax tablet, but the true gate is his memory. Rome is a database with sandals. Your sponsor's name clicks the latch, and the half-open door becomes a stage. The vestibulum swallows you, kulosko, and stone bright, and the street shrinks to a ribbon. You pass the lararium, where painted guardians accept incense like discreet chaperones. Water chatters in the impluvium. Moonlight stitches itself across the pool. In the tablinum ancestral masks, the imagines watch with patient authority. It's how Romans place yesterday beside your elbow without raising their voice. Architecture begins to instruct appetite. Rooms are cues, not containers. A generous sightline here, a narrow passage there, a breeze carrying coriander and honey from the back. The cook will later tuck a peacock feather where it accidentally catches candlelight. The position of a couch will prove it's rehearsed. In Rome, corridors teach you how to want. A slave touches your hands with perfumed water. Myrrh and a little cinnamon drift up ferried along Red Sea routes that make Pliny mutter about silver leaking east. You don't quote him, but you hear the tone, the friend who admires and scolds at once. Painted gardens open on the walls, ivy birds, fountains that never dry. A poet in the corner pretends to improvise lines he rehearsed all afternoon. Another guest laughs a shade too loudly, auditioning for a higher place. The host doesn't laugh. He curates. His smile is a placement in yes, not a reaction. You've heard the tales Petronius sketches Trimalchio timing courses to rise like constellations. Nero fits his golden house with a dining room that turns so the sky can join the show. Exaggeration. Yes, and also no. Rome gilds its truths. Scrape gently, and you still find wood underneath. Tonight's list blends senators, equestrians, a mime, and that philosopher who claims he avoids late nights and somehow always attends. If you read Seneca, you know the sermon, excess chews through character. Simple food is braver. He isn't wrong, and still he pockets the invitation because saying no to Rome's anthology is like skipping your own city. The code of access works in front of you. A freeborn citizen in a patterned mantle pretends not to notice a merchant's wife drifting by with pearls that signal money on time. A general lowers his voice when a former slave of startling influence glides past on 3 compliments and an audit of everyone's sandals. Birth claims to order the world. Nights like this rearrange it by entry and angle. Staff move on a tight script. A nimble cupbearer reads faces the way a scribe reads margins, refilling, retreating, never blocking the sightline you're meant to have. A curtain lifts and drops like a quiet breath. A musician tunes a lyre to the room's temperature. You think of modern playlists, and Smile Romans had algorithms too. They just listened for cues with bare feet on tile. A tray of olives, modeled like moons, wakes your mouth brine thyme vinegar. Someone remarks on oysters from Lake Lucrinus and their months with an ER, and you do the small nod that says you knew, even if you didn't. Trivia is a handshake. A reference is a cushion. You glance out and catch the street as if through curtains, a torch hiss a mule bell, 2 cooks bartering saffron for gossip. Rome after dark is a market in slow motion. The city sells you a feeling and calls it tradition. You buy it and call it belonging. Quick check couch along the left wall where talkers hold court, or the one near the fountain where listeners quietly run the room. Someone asks about your day. You offer 2 safe facts: breadline long weather, clear, and keep the rest in your pocket. The host glides to your shoulder. Light steps, practiced smile eyes that inventory without seeming to, and includes you with a gesture so polished it feels like friendship. A bronze lamp is trimmed with a delicate spoon. The flame tightens and shadows print themselves onto a seaside fresco. Masts flicker across painted waves. You're doing a very Roman thing, turning ordinary light into theater. From the courtyard, a thin line of song winds in more rehearsal than performance. You catch a nod to Vine Crowns. It lands cushioned by perfume and expectation. A clever guest folds a line from Horace into a compliment about the garden, and you store the trick the way you once copied a friend's 2-handed wave. Your shoulders drop exactly as the building intends. Height matters recline too low, and you look grateful. Too high, and you look grand. The sweet spot is practiced ease. You wonder what the operation costs. Answer less if the host stretches credit, more if the wine is Falernian and the fish crossed half an empire on crushed ice. You trace the rim of a dolphin-stamped cup, cool metal warming under your palm. The cup will circulate to your neighbor, to the orator, with thin wrists, back to you, pretending there are no edges in a room built on them. Breathe. Listen. Notice the Roman trick. Indulgence, shaped to resemble etiquette, and etiquette dressed as civic duty. A tidy laugh breaks to your right. You turn and feel your name drift into a story you didn't know you'd joined, and you let it place you. Among strangers who already feel familiar, the way a city sometimes guides your steps. Before you choose a destination, names travel faster than footsteps in this house, and you feel it when a discreet hand appears with a slim wax tablet your name impressed. Beside others, shining where the stylus pressed deep. It's the famous filter, a velvet rope and beeswax. No trumpets, just a rectangle that says you matter as much as the hand that wrote you, not a grain more. You learn the rote an invitation takes. It begins in the host's tablinum, where a secretary reads candidates as calmly as a weather report. A nomenclator living contact list carries the summons often after the morning salutatio, when clients queue for small talk, and the sportula that keeps loyalty warm. If you've never stood at dawn for attention dressed as generosity, are you even living in a big city? The tablet doesn't say, "Come hungry." It says, "Come visible." Marshall jokes that top seats taste better wine, while the distant seats discover vinegar, and Juvenal mutters that an entire pecking order hides inside the breadbasket. You don't need to quote them to get the point. Who eats what, where, and when is a live map of favor. Your name on the tablet vaults you over the threshold. Your position in the room will tell you how high you landed. Look closer. Wax over wood, tied with cord, sometimes sealed. If the host likes ceremony. A slave boy reads it to those whose eyes are tired from public business. Another makes quiet adjustments with a gentle scrape and rewrite as fluid as editing a guest list on your phone. Someone asks if a certain equestrian can bring a witty cousin. The secretary hesitates, remembers last time, and moves a stylus. Half a thumb's width friendship by millimeter. Why invite when power could command? Because invitation is softer power. It flatters while it arranges. It lets the host choose a chorus that will sing the right notes, a senator to be seen a poet to varnish the pauses a merchant with a rumor about grain, a celebrated cook on loan, and two clients who will clap at the exact volume the evening requires. You're here because your presence does a job. Becoming interesting to the right person is a Roman career skill. Status doesn't stop at the door. It blooms under the lamps. A magister be bendy tonight's drink. Captain may be appointed by lots or whim to set the water-to-wine ratio. Later, which is less about safety and more about tempo. The list governs entrances, too. High rank drifts in late enough to be noticed, and early enough to avoid rudeness. Those who owe favors arrive on time, as if punctuality were a civic oath. Ever pondered, the right amount of late Rome calibrates that. Two names catch your ear. One guest is a freedman, whose business tentacles wrap 2 ports and a marble yard. Another is born grand but short on cash. The invitation erases one disadvantage and highlights another. Wealth without pedigree gets a foot in. Lineage without liquidity gets a cushion and a lifeline. In minutes, the room will translate those differences into the invisible radius of each voice. There's a quasi-legal feel. Romans love writing wills, contracts, even jokes. And the guest list is a soft contract with hard edges. Don't perform, and your wax may vanish next time with a casual swipe. Perform well, and you might be moved closer to the zone where conversation turns into obligation. Cicero campaigned with dinners as deftly as with speeches. A seating plan is a paragraph that writes itself into tomorrow's favors. 3 couches shape the night an elegant U around a low table. Lamps pull shadows inward. The exact spot matters because it decides your audience and your reach. The host claims a strategic corner where he can speak to many with minimum effort and maximum notice. The most honored place sits where every eye can find the guest without craning central enough to command the room close enough for the host's aside. A servant guides you with a practiced gesture. If you recline near powerful elbows, you're in the current. If you're placed at the far end by the draft, you are present but peripheral, the laugh track, not the lead. It isn't cruelty, it's calibration. Even cushion thickness says something. A lofty bolster is a miniature laurel. A thin one reminds you to speak when spoken to. Information travels with the refills. A cupbearer leans, hears a whisper, and the whisper grows legs. Who arrived with whom? Which magistrate praised? Which poem? Why the fish? Stalled social currency minted in real time. If you could mute a rumor, here would you? Invitations also choreograph silences. A philosopher sits 2 places away. He is ornament and warning. With a raised brow, he can turn generosity into a reflection on restraint, and the host knows it. That brow is part of the decor, like ivy and marble, and tonight it has been seated where the moral glare reads as sophistication rather than scolding. Seneca might approve or pretend he didn't attend. Either way, the hint of philosophy costs nothing and buys an air of balance. Practical question. What if you weren't invited but arrived with someone who was? The answer depends on your escort's courage and the host's patience. You might be waved in and set on a stool beside the couches, fed kindly yet visibly outside the pattern, the way a modern office seats a contractor at the edge of the table. You are present, useful, not central. And yes, polite decline rules apply. If you received the tablet and sent a refusal, your reasons must be respectable. Illness, a vow, a family right. Offer a flimsy excuse, and the wax remembers. Marshall files entire poems under petty accounting, and you promise yourself to stay generous because Rome's memory is long, and most of it walks on 2 legs. The last thing you notice before reclining fully is how the invitation has already edited your posture. Shoulders lower, voice modulates appetite, listens to the room. You didn't come only to eat. You came to be arranged into a night retold at tomorrow's baths and in the forum when someone needs a reason to trust you or to test you. The tablet's tidy letters have turned into cushions glances and the comfortable hazard of being watched while pretending you aren't. Someone laughs at the doorway. Someone else pulls a curtain. The list has done its work. It has built a room out of names and placed you inside it. You slide into the room's quiet geometry and feel how furniture directs human behavior the way a conductor shapes a chorus. Three couches, triclinium, literally three couch. Embrace a low table like a horseshoe, and every cushion is a sentence. In an unspoken paragraph, you're learning to read while pretending you already could. You recline on your left elbow, because that's the rule, not a suggestion, leaving your right hand free for cup and morsel. It looks lazy, but it's coordination disguised as leisure. The body becomes a place setting, and you quickly notice how weight angle and reach turn into manners without anyone saying mind your elbows. Lean too far forward and you crowd the table. Lean too far back and you risk looking bored when you're actually saving your spine. Each couch holds up to 3 diners, 9 in the classic layout, though plenty of hosts cheat the number to make the conversation feel airy or on busy nights to test a carpenter's faith in joinery. The central couch, think of it as the headline offers the clearest stage. The honored spot sits where every face can find it, with minimal neck acrobatics often at the end nearest the host so glances travel short distances. Your host positions himself where he can run the room with small motions greeting a senator, over here tipping a joke toward a poet there, and you begin to understand that leadership can look like comfort when the plan is good. Sandals pause at the threshold of cushions. A servant offers soft indoor slippers or bare feet on cool mosaic, and another hands you a cloth sudarium for your fingers. Later, the Roman answered to the modern napkin. Warm water trickles from a pitcher over your hands into a basin, a tiny fountain that says, "Our evening begins clean," and a splash of scented oil turns the gesture into ceremony. If you've ever watched a barista wipe the machine just before drawing your espresso, same energy, different century. A boy sets down a salt cellar, salinum, quietly important because salt is friendship and permanence in a dish. Sometimes an heirloom, sometimes a miniature stage, where a household's history perches between bites. The first course arrives, gustaccio, little starters to wake the tongue, olives, eggs with herbs, mushrooms. If the season is kind honeyed nuts for mischief, the sort of bites that remind you this meal is a ladder and you are only on the first rung. You take something small. And remember a tip you overheard at the baths: never sprint on the first course. Rome rewards stamina. Watch the service choreography. The structor, the arranger, directs plates like a stage manager, while the carver, Juvenal loved to tease this role, turns slicing into theater, showing off a steady wrist and a tasteful pivot of the blade. The cup-bearers orbit at differing speeds, depending on rank, fast for the middle couch, unhurried for the far end, a steady pour for the host's cluster. A magister bibendi, tonight's drink captain, will soon announce the mixing ratio for wine and water, because Roman wine arrives strong and needs a conversation with the fountain before it joins the table. You learn to hear ratios, the way modern people read weather. 3 parts water on a talky night. 2 parts if the host wants volume. The mixing bowl crater sits like a small bronze planet, and amphorae tilt to it with graceful honesty. Whatever is poured has been hauled from a hillside, paid for in coin and reputation, and stored against hope and mildew. The cups themselves vary glass that catches firelight silver, with dolphins chasing their tails, plain ceramic that asks you to watch the people, not the glaze. You're tempted to rank them, but here the real status marker is proximity to the quick refills and the short jokes. Food flows in chapters. After gustaccio comes the main round, prima mensa fish steaming open like a map of distant coasts, poultry browned, and glossy vegetables dressed with vinegar and mint sauces that turn tang into silk. No one calls it a mane out loud. The room just understands and rearranges breaths. Later, Secunda Mensa will bring sweets fruits and little surprises designed less to fill than to linger. If you're tempted to call that dessert, you can, but watch how the Romans use it to seal talk rather than to distract from it. Conversation obeys physics here. Closest voices carry. Distant laughter becomes texture. You practice the lateral reply, addressing the person to your left, while angling your answer to include the one beyond them, because a Roman couch is social origami and the folds matter. The host's eye moves like a metronome. He wants 3 conversations, humming one rising, one resting, another ready to be borrowed when the poet finally lands his punchline. Ever been at a dinner and felt the energy sag like a hammock? Roman hosts black-belted the fix centuries ago. Change the wine rotate, the topic bring in a tray with something aromatic. Reset the room without saying reset. Etiquette rides alongside appetite. You break bread with fingers, you dab rather than wipe you. Praise the sauce without interrogating the recipe unless invited. If you quote a line of poetry, you aim it like a compliment, not a test. The rule about not reaching across another person's plate is less about hygiene than geography. In a reclined world, crossing zones turns graceful into clumsy at the speed of a thoughtless hand. Security sits in the wings silently. Important guests sometimes have a pregustator. Taste a bite first, a careful ritual more common at imperial tables, where ambition can sneak into seasonings. Here, the signal is subtler. A trusted servant takes a token sip, nods, vanishes. You realize how safety becomes etiquette when everyone agrees to pretend it's only etiquette. Light is an ingredient. Bronze lamps throw leaves of flame across plaster vines, so the murals seem to breathe along with the room. A servant trims wicks with a tiny spoon, pinching smoke into obedience, and shadows tuck themselves under couches like well-behaved dogs. If you've ever adjusted a dimmer to make people kinder and jokes softer, you and the ancients share a toolkit. The seating order folds politics without creasing it. A rising equestrian reclines near an old senator so the city can observe respect, learning confidence. A famous freedman with flawless accounts sits where his laugh can be heard by 2 magistrates at once. A philosopher enjoys medium placement because too much virtue near the tablecloth is a wet cloak on a campfire. You notice a pattern closeness to the host correlates with tasks he'll assign tomorrow. The triclinium isn't a lounge, it's a whiteboard with cushions. Between courses, basins return for finger rinsing, and nimble hands whisk crumbs with a feather fan. Someone tosses a line about Horace loving a simple meal. Someone else answers with a smile and an oyster, because Romans debate without stopping the music. Do you ever catch yourself wanting to clap for the staff while pretending not to? You do now, quietly in your chest, grateful for the invisible grid beneath the evening. Glass clinks with a little ceremony when the Magister Bibendi raises his cup. He proposes a round fit for the hour, and you take a measured sip, because finishing first is as gauche as a toga worn like a bedsheet. The room warms 1 degree, shoulders ease. A story about a chariot win at the Circus Maximus unspools, and you find your place in its rhythm without elbowing. One last detail completes the mechanics, the exit paths. Servants move in silent lanes mapped to the mosaic slipping behind couches at spots where neither conversation nor lamp glare is interrupted. A curtain breathes. A platter appears. A platter leaves. A cushion is adjusted with the precision of a harp tuning. You may think of a modern open kitchen where the line cooks speak in a language of nods and pans. The triclinium did it in sandals with the same choreography. You settle into your left elbow again. Feel the mosaic cool at your ankle. Watch the host release the next turn of the evening with the tiniest lift of fingers and realize the room itself has taught you how to belong without ever explaining the lesson out loud. Fire kisses copper, and the room hushes like a theater before the curtain. Tonight flavor walks in with the swagger of a parade drum, and you realize Rome seasons appetite the way a magistrate seasons law generously with a wink. Gustaccio has done its job. Now the table leans forward. A silver platter glides low steam, carrying coriander, long pepper, and the dark, salty hum you met at the door. Garum, the backbone sauce. Romans treat like an old family friend who knows too much, but is welcome anyway. You try a simple bite. Eggs cut into moons. Warm wine honeyed, just enough. A sprinkle of pepper that crossed monsoon winds to reach this very plate, and you taste how empire compresses into a mouthful. A name circulates the table, as if he were pouring the wine himself. Apicius. One meaning is a legendary gourmet who chased novelty like a general chases banners. The other is the cookbook tradition attached to his name, a patchwork of recipes that turn pantry and province into synonyms. Someone repeats the famous boast about sailing for exceptional prawns and turning back when merely good appeared. Is it exaggerated naturally? Is it instructive? Completely. Rome performs values with stories you can eat. From the culina, heat breathes like a second orchestra. Braziers glow, pans hiss, a structor calls order with quiet authority, and the carver's blade taps wood as if tuning a lyre. A tray of oysters from Lake Lucrinus does a practiced lap brine. A flash of grape syrup boiled down to velvet. A leaf of lovage to nudge the sea from roar to murmur. You notice the logistics hiding inside the garnish runners, swapping loads at the city gate, so freshness can arrive with dignity, the same way a modern courier posts a delivery time like a medal. Red mullet Milos arrives with the color Romans prize so deeply they once staged tiny tragedies over it. Tonight there's no spectacle about fading hues, only a careful poach and a sauce folding oil garum and herbs into silk. Bitterness is tamed, not erased the way a clever host softens a disagreement without pretending it never existed. Nearby a roast bird gleams goose when the season fattens kindly peacock if the host wants conversation as much as meat. You take a courteous slice and learn that sometimes the idea on the platter feeds the room more than the protein. Do you ever trust a chef to send something you didn't order just because the grin says, "Let me show you, Romans lived for that moment"? At showier houses, you might meet the satire made famous by Petronius Bores with staged surprises. A hare dressed with wings to joke about Pegasus courses arranged as zodiac signs so the cosmos itself seems plated. True reportage? Not exactly. True to the spirit of a city that marries theater to appetite? Absolutely. A disc of turbot lands before you, an unbidden juvenile's poem about Domitian's council meeting to solve the problem of a fish too large for the kitchen echoes in the room. Ridiculous, yes. Revealing also, yes. Abundance bends attention into policy. You sip wine, and watch how swiftly conversation organizes itself around the largest object on the table, just as crowds gather around the loudest rumor in the forum. Spice speaks with a traveler's accent tonight. Pepper is generous, costly, fragrant living proof that Muziris once whispered to Roman ledgers, and Asafoetida takes the role of the vanished laser, starting sharp and ending warm when blended right. It's easy to overdo. The kitchen doesn't. Your tongue learns restraint the same way your ears learned that a small laugh sometimes carries farther than a shout. Wine keeps time under the eye of the Magister Bibendi. The crater waits like a bronze planet. Amphore tip. Water negotiates with strength until the ratio matches the evening's tempo. Falernian strides in with dried fig confidence. Kekubin has the gravity of an elder, and a lighter Alban smooths the edges so stories can be told without tripping over tannins. A small bucket of snow-chilled water appears for favored cups, an ancient answer to ice or no ice that feels almost modern in its politeness. Bread arrives as round loaves, scored like wheels, the same style archaeologists lifted carbonized from Pompeii's ovens. You break it by hand, dip into inagarum, where wine and fish sauce carry on a quarrel that ends in friendship. And you think of every table where contrasts have to negotiate before anyone truly relaxes. A dish of edible dormice raised in gleraria, dusted with poppy and honey circles, with the self-awareness of a celebrity cameo. Satire loves them. The kitchen redeems them. You take one and declare neutrality with a smile. From the hearth, a cook fans coals with a woven screen. Bay leaf smokes sweetly. Lamprey glistens in a tart, savory bath that takes fearsome and translates it as silky. Vegetables form a chorus of good sense leeks, softened in oil cabbage, bright with cumin and vinegar asparagus that survives a shy lash of pepper. Restraint is deliberate here. A host who only shouts doesn't understand tempo. And tonight's tempo has crescendos followed by clear air. Sauces do the heavy lifting like bass lines in songs you love. Maridum whispers garlic and herbs. Alec, thick with fishy depth, behaves like umami before the term was coined. Mustards thicken with must, and reductions remember grapes as memory, not sweetness. You begin listening for sauces the way you listen for percussion. If it stops, the whole thing sags. A neighbor notices you noticing and nods the universal sign of two people hearing the same rhythm. A neat brag slides around the couches about the fish's root nets at dawn, relay of runners, quick hands at the gate, and you see how supply chains have always been social theater. Another platter dramatizes generosity. A pig opened with a single elegant cut, small sausages tumbling like coins. It's an edible speech. This house is prosperous, but more importantly, this house shares. Would you clap if etiquette allowed? Perhaps. You settle for a grin. Second Mensa tiptoes in without ringing the dessert bell. Cheese lounges next to honeycomb. Figs arrive wrinkled like friendly elders. Pears poached in wine glow with a quiet pride. A small panis moustachious cake, scented with must and laurel, pretends to say goodbye while keeping you at the table. Romans dislike tidy endings even on plates. Perfume passes with the fruit, just a breath of myrrh over wrists, so the room smells like celebration rather than aftermath. Occasionally, a showpiece dares the room, flamingo tinted by its own color, and a confederacy of spices. Not everyday fare. Not even most day fare. But perfect if the host wants a story to travel to tomorrow's baths. You take a ceremonial nibble. respect the novelty, and return to the mullet's glaze, because subtlety ages better than headlines. Between trays, feather brushes erase crumbs. Oils are refilled. A nod at the doorway means now. The precision would look familiar on a modern pass line. Different tools, same orchestration. When the Magister Bibendi taps for a toast, the words are less about drinking than attribution. Someone praises the vintner who saved a harvest from mildew. Someone else salutes sailors who ride the monsoon like calendar accountants. Another thanks the fishermen of Lucrinus, and the room agrees that credit tastes almost as good as sauce. One last question slips across the lamp glow. If the gods offered you 1 minute of invisibility, what would you steal from tonight? You glance at the lamprey's sheen, the date-stuffed sweetness, the mullet turned into manners, and you realize your answer is neither fish nor bird. You'd take the pan where sauces are born, because that's where Rome keeps its secrets until the very last moment. And if you carry away the method, the table follows you home whether the peacock shows up or not. You start noticing how the room edits itself, not only with plates and ratios, but with glances, pauses, and little stage tricks that tug the eye. Romans call it entertainment. You register it as orchestration of pulse. First, the poet. He slides in from a shadow posture, humble voice clear a few hendecasyllables about a vineyard and a ship that never learned to fear the wind. The lines float light as steam, then tighten around a punchline that lands without bruising. You laugh the way people laugh when a joke has no victims and every listener feels chosen, and you realize the poet's job is to lift the ceiling a finger's width so the next act can walk taller. The lute answers next. A woman in dyed wool plucks a melody built for lamplight, not for streets. Her rhythm is a long breath with a grin in it. She doesn't dazzle, she steadies. Even good feasts need ballast, and song is ballast with perfume. A cymbal sighs. Somewhere near the peristyle, a dancer marks time with an ankle bell, softer than a cat's footstep on tile. Your shoulders find the room's beat, the way oars find a river's. Shock done right needs a cushion. Romans never throw fireworks before they spread sand. You see the sand. In the quiet acts, the poet, the lute, then comes the glint. A pair of pantomimes enter faces bright with the calm of experts. No words, just a plot. Your eyes can read a merchant tempted by a glittering trinket, a spouse who outsmarts him, without raising a voice, a final bow that thanks cleverness rather than scolding desire. Applause moves like a breeze. You join it partly for the skill, partly because that little parable just ironed a wrinkle out of the room without anyone pointing at the wrinkle. Hosts borrow from the theater because the theater borrows from life. Petronius, who knew timing the way sailors know, wind teases with Trimalchio's showpieces, not because they never happened, but because everyone recognizes the tension between astonishment and taste. Tonight's host goes for the elegant kind of astonishment. A boy releases a handful of rose petals from the balcony, only enough to kiss shoulders and hair, an airy nod to the old story about showers so heavy they smothered guests, the sort of tale Suetonius stores with a raised brow. You brush a petal from your sleeve and file the gesture maximal, symbol, minimal mess. Innuendo works here like well-cut cloth. It fits, it flatters, it never pinches. A comic delivers a line that looks like praise for the sauce, but slyly crowns the carver's steady hand, wrapping compliment and flirtation in the same ribbon. If you've ever watched a modern host translate, we value your feedback into please enjoy what we've already chosen. You've met the Roman talent for saying two things at once. The trick is to keep both meanings inside PG-13. And you see the line, policed by nothing harsher than a raised eyebrow from the philosopher 2 cushions away. He's part of the staging that philosopher. Rome loves its moral shadows just as much as its chandeliers. A single cleared throat at the right moment is as effective as a guardrail. Seneca would call it temperance. The host calls it tone management. And yet the same eyebrow that contains excess also sharpens a joke. Nothing gilds a witty line like the sense that a grown-up is in the room. Masks arrive. Not the fright kind, the playful kind you'd meet at a festival. A servant offers you a light linen half mask, a harmless anonymity that lets you answer a riddle without owning the wrong guess. A small box appears with carved tokens. Each token holds a word. Draw one, improvise a couplet that includes it past the box. You pull river stitch it to silver and land something barely serviceable. Laughter is kind because the laughter is for participation, not precision. Ever notice how certain parties make you perform and then punish you for it? Rome does the opposite. When the host is good, the task is gentle. The applause is generous. Everyone wins by playing. Conversation turns like a stage turntable. A matron offers a story about a banquet where a trained starling flew messages between couches and across from you. A magistrate counters with a tame rumor about an actor whose shoes had to be gilded twice in 1 week because the city wore the gold off with gossip. You can feel juvenile, somewhere sharpening a line, but tonight satire nudges it doesn't bite. You add a modest modern comparison, like the time a viral clip moved a mayor faster than a memo, and a few heads nod as if you've contributed a respectable condiment. Shock again, but softer. A curtain at the tablinum lifts, and the house's imported fountain catches lamplight in a quick illusion, droplets looking like coins midair. Coins fall, but not money. Tiny bronze discs, stamped with dolphins made for games, raining into a shallow bowl, so that the sound says abundance without inventing a scandal. A child somewhere would squeal. Tonight adults manage a refined version, but the emotion is the same. The host has thrown you joy that doesn't require a ledger entry tomorrow. A performer with a narrow flute steps forward for a piece that quotes the festival of Bacchus without borrowing its thunder. You hear a thread of the old rites, mask Thyrsus, the letting go that terrifies city fathers, and then the melody returns to a polite cadence before anyone needs rescuing from their own enthusiasm. That's a Roman skill gesture, at the edge, never crowded. Later, we'll walk closer during festival nights. But in a private house, the edge is something you outline with light, not something you jump from. You notice costumes doing micro work. A gold thread border at a sleeve nods to a rank that isn't tonight's headline. A wreath of ivy with fewer leaves than the statues wears a joke about moderation. A servant's belt, dyed Tyrian purple only on the inside, tells other servants exactly who carries which message to which ear. Clothes here are captions, not megaphones. Games reset the air. Knuckle bones clack onto a travel board, not for money, only for storyline. Throw, laugh, invent a forfeit, recite a line from Ovid about love without using the word love. You reach for ars and art and frame desire as craft. A couple of guests applaud because they like the argument as much as the meter. Ovid would approve or write a footnote. Either way, the point land's elegance lives in the detour. The cupbearers edit volume. They pour one guest a touch more water into the wine, another a touch less, and the room's temperature drifts to the setting the host asked for when he appointed the magister Bibendi. You've seen a DJ red a room and slow a beat without anyone walking off the floor. Tonight you watch a boy in sandals do the same with amphorae. There is always a hinge trick reserved for the middle of the night. Here it is. The door to the garden opens on a faint swirl of night air, and a pair of tame doves coast in a practiced arc before landing on a stand threaded with rosemary. No magic, no surprise to the household, but the gesture corrals attention in one place, so the staff can reset the table behind you. The best illusions aren't about deception. They buy time without admitting the purchase. Somewhere in the sequence, the host loses a ring and finds it baked inside a small loaf that will be sliced into equal shares. It's an old trick, borrowed from older festivals, a gentle lottery with no losers, because the prize is the laugh, not the medal. You're asked to make a wish for the house when the ring reappears. You oblige with words about calm seas and fair harvests. No one scoffs. Sincerity is the richest spice. It only curdles when stirred too long. Beware the dead zone after a large laugh. The good host never leaves it empty. A reader steps in with a quick anecdote about Maecenas rescuing a conversation with a single sideways question. And the anecdote itself becomes the sideways question for your table. If you could redirect any room with one sentence, what would you ask? A few hands rise. You listen. You file phrases for future nights, and you feel the evening returning to cruise speed without breaking a sweat. You catch your reflection in a polished wine cup lamplight, a stray petal, a smear of honey near your thumb, and you realize the seduction here isn't about people at all. It's about timing. Jokes arrive where they won't be lonely. Music holds a door while plates pass through. Shock is measured like salt never dumped. And when someone leans in to whisper a compliment, that could also be a promise the philosophy brow doesn't need to lift. The room itself edits the sentence, trims just enough, and leaves the pleasant bit glowing like a coal the wind forgot to claim. You don't just appear at a Roman dinner, you marinate for it. And the marinade is heat, steam, oil, and gossip that sounds like water when you're standing close enough. The thermi breathe like a tame volcano. A doorkeeper takes a tiny coin, and you step from street dust into a sequence the city has perfected: palaestra for movement, apoditerium for clothes, then the warm, then hot, then cold embrace of rooms that train your skin to applaud. If a modern gym spa and co-working space had a stone child, it would look like this: oaths in whispers, business with towels, friendships negotiated between breaths. You stretch in the palaestra. First, because a table is easier when your joints have already argued and made peace. Men toss the trigon ball with quick, showy catches. A trainer counts beats as if meter were good for muscles. Somebody demonstrates weights in a way that says, I can afford bread. You join just enough to loosen the back you were protecting in the triclinium and give yourself the small glow of effort that reads well under lamplight later. Capsarii attendants watch the apoditerium like hawks with good manners. You hand over your clothes, mark the niche, and learn the first lesson. Trust is an oil you apply in thin coats. A small theft will earn a big story tomorrow, so hands keep to their lanes. You carry forward only the sudarium cloth for padding your sandals and the mild vanity that arrives when marble replaces dust. The tepidarium is the handshake, warm kind, persuasive. Moist air smooths the day's edges. Mosaic floors turn your footfalls into polite clicks. Above a curved ceiling gathers droplets that ring the room like a slow metronome. You notice a shelf lined with little flasks, private stock, of unguentum almond myrrh, a mutter of cinnamon, because scent here is social armor. Choose too heavy, and you announce. Choose too faint, and you apologize. The sweet spot is intention that smells like discretion. You move to the caldarium. Steam writes brief letters on your skin and erases them before you can read. A brazier's glow comes through the marble like a heartbeat. A slave tips warm water from a labrum bowl onto your shoulders, and the world shrinks to a blissful radius the size of your breath. Seneca once grumbled about the bathhouse being a symphony, grunters, splashers, cake sellers shouting fresh, and you hear his point dimly through the haze. Yet even he knew that a city needs a place to rinse its noise into community. The strigil comes out curved metal tool edge, gentle enough to flatter. Oil first, then scrape. A bath attendant works the blade along your arm, and you watch the day lift away in ribbons, dust, olive, a little pride. If you've ever seen a barista pull a perfect crema and swipe the excess to make the cup clean, same pleasure, different century. Pumice softens rough spots. A deft hand tests the line between careful grooming and courtship of vanity. You let the line stand because tomorrow's lamps will reward the discipline of tonight. Someone passes a joke about gladiators selling sweat by the vial as a charm for fans, part rumor, part marketing all Rome. You're not buying novelty, you're buying finish. A barber tonsure works at one end razor and steady hand offering cheek touch-ups and the tidy removal of stray hair that would misbehave in lamplight. Alum calms the skin with a kiss of sting you pretend not to notice. Deal-making hides in the steam. A grain merchant murmurs to a magistrate about river levels. An advocate tests a line for tomorrow. A poet trades a couplet for an introduction. Eye contact is currency. You spend some, you save some. Ask yourself if you could file one rumor here for retrieval at dinner. Which would it be, the shortage, the wedding, or the hint that a certain host favors pepper merchants this season? Choose one. You can't carry everything out in a single towel. Perfume has its own route across the empire. Nard out of the mountains, myrrh, riding red sea ships, cardamom, coming home scented like ports you've never seen. Pliny will scold about silver draining east. You will nod and still accept a drop behind the ear because ethics smells better when it waits until morning. The best houses cut oils with good taste, a little saffron if the purse is bold rose, if the mood wants soft light citrus peels when summer needs help remembering it's friendly. When heat threatens to turn your thoughts into syrup, the frigidarium rescues. You take the step, you always half dread the plunge that reunites body and spine. Cold wraps you like logic. You surface with a sound not dignified, and every person within hearing pretends not to notice because we have all negotiated with cold and we respect each other's deals. Marble rings, your heart reorders its concerns. the world outside looks possible again. Between rooms, the floor system hums hippocaust, a whole architecture made to float warmth underfoot. Slender pillars pile hold the floor above channels of hot air. You are literally lifted on a cushion of heat produced by slaves tending furnaces you'll never see. Luxury and labor share a wall here, and you register it without pretending the wall isn't thick. In the Laconicum, a dry heat room, a small circle of veterans talk politics wrapped in towels, like senators in abbreviated togas. One makes a theater of moderation, praising simple meals with the precision of a man who has a complicated chef. You smile privately. Your evening has already proved that Rome's favorite act is balance performed by specialists. You do your part, drink water, nod, at the right cadence leave with skin that can accept a spotlight. Time matters. Bathing late afternoon means you'll arrive at the house carrying warmth, like a private furnace that never smokes. Too early, and the scent fades. Too late, and you rush, which reads as need, which smells like worry. Romans cultivate the illusion of unhurriedness, the way gardeners cultivate laurel clip. Constantly display, sparingly pretend it grows this way by itself. In the unctorium, oiling becomes art. A servant warms a small alabastron between his palms, then draws 2 lines across your shoulders with the kind of concentration usually reserved for calligraphy. You choose a blend that reads clean and a little expensive without waving. The servant finishes with a thumb press along the collarbone to sharpen posture. You stand up straighter, as if you invented the idea. Clothes return fresh tunic cleaner sandals, a mantle that won't fight your seat later. Linen whispers when you move. A friend checks your shoulder for stray oil. You return the favor with a grin that says we are both ready to be seen without auditioning. The mirror polished bronze imperfect honest hands you. A face that belongs naturally in lamplight. Outside, the evening has cooled just enough to keep perfume close. Street vendors call. A boy races past with a caged thrush that will learn someone's name by week's end. A laundress laughs at a story you only half catch. You walk with the pace of a person who has already had a good day. Prepping for pleasure isn't decadence here, it's civic competence. You arrive at the door smelling like a promise and speaking with muscles that remember heat. A last thought as you pause at the threshold: the bath didn't erase the city. It taught you how to carry it well. You're oiled, but not oily, scented but not noisy, relaxed enough to be generous, and tuned enough to read the room you're about to re-enter. The doorkeeper nods, the hinge whispers, and you cross back into the script you helped write this afternoon with steam blades and a little myrrh. Tonight, the city loosens its laces if Rome had laces, and you feel the street inhale like a choir about to forget the sheet music on purpose. You follow sound first, then scent. Drums roll from a courtyard. Pipe notes curl like grapevines. Resinous smoke climbs a column and sketches ivy in the air. The house you left earlier still hums with wine and cleverness, but outside the neighborhood's pulse quickens towards something older, leaf-crowned, and a little mischievous. You've washed, oiled, and practiced elegant moderation. Now, you're invited to watch what happens when moderation takes a night off without filing paperwork. A procession gathers, not the solemn kind with polished fasces, but a friendly pilgrimage of neighbors who know the steps. Lamps swing, garlands bob. A child carries a small thyrsus, a fennel staff tipped with a pine cone, too big for his arm and exactly right for the mood. Someone handed you a wreath of ivy back at the doorway. You wear it lightly respectful of the plant that belongs to Bacchus, the way laurel belongs to triumphs. Wine passes hand to hand in shallow cups, cut with enough water to sing rather than shout. The music is portable architecture. A tympanum drum finds your ribs. An aulos pipe braids 2 notes into a cozy spiral. Clappers keep a heartbeat everyone can step to. You fall into pace beside a baker with flour like moonlight on his tunic, and a seamstress whose laugh edits the night brighter. Rome has many gods. Bacchus is the one who convinces strangers to harmonize without rehearsal. Ritual lives in gestures. A priest flamen touches smoke to a small altar, murmurs a prayer for safe vines and kinder winters, then gives the signal that transforms piety into chorus. The chorus doesn't erase reverence, it stretches it. You've heard the old stories, Dionysus wandering, teaching vines to climb, rescuing sailors with a burst of leaves, the theater that grew from his festivals, the masks that let a city try on feelings without staining its good clothes. You look around and see the footnotes, glowing ivy crowns, light masks, the polite buzz of civic joy. At the edge of your eye sits a memory carved in wall painting. The mystery freezes at the Villa of the Mysteries near Pompeii. The young woman, the winged figure, the thyrsus, the drum faces intent, with something between instruction and ecstasy. Are these scenes literal? Scholars argue in whispers and footnotes. What matters in your feet tonight is that Rome knows how to choreograph release, so it looks like confidence, not chaos. Livy would like a word of course. He tells how in 186 BCE the Senate issued a stern letter to Italy. The Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, limiting nocturnal gatherings, insisting on permissions, and writing rules so crisp you can still read them on stone, pulled from Brutium. The point wasn't to ban joy. It was to keep it on a leash with a name tag. You think of that as you pass a wall where someone has painted a vine. The vine ignores the top edge and keeps climbing. Regulation is a trellis. The plant appreciates structure, then uses it to reach the moon. A neighbor offers you raisins swollen in wine, as if passing a secret. You accept with the smile you learned inside the triclinium gratitude, with a dash of yes, I belong here. The courtyard at the end of the lane opens like a palm. Torches ring an altar. Musicians take a breath. Dancers pantomimes again, but with looser wrists slip into a story you can read even if you missed rehearsal. It's a tale of a lost traveler finding his path by following laughter, which is a very Roman way to say, don't be afraid of the night. We curated it. Faces soften behind handheld masks. Not anonymity permission. The baker sways. The seamstress hums. An elderly man with a philosopher's beard taps time with a sandal like he's scolding joy and encouraging it in the same gesture. Children chase the torchlight in a careful orbit agreed upon by mothers and marble steps. You consider whether modern block parties owe royalties to Liber and decide yes in spirit and in snacks. Wine has a role, but it's not the main character. The Magister Babendi from earlier would approve water ratio, high cups, small refills, steady enough to warm, not enough to tip the city sideways. A woman with a lyre sings a tune about a hillside harvest. The chorus answers on the third line, off-key, in a way that feels, more Roman than perfection. Ask yourself, When was the last time you sang with people you just met and felt your shoulders forgive you? That's the core of the cult, permission to unfasten without unmaking. A young man, perhaps too eager, tries to spin the thyrsus as if it were a sword. The pine cone keeps him honest, bumping his knuckles in a soft correction. Laughter cushions the moment. A priestess corrects his grip, palms up wrists, relaxed, hinting that Bacchic tools are made for growing, not cutting. That's the line tonight. Abundance without injury, fervor without fractures. Even revelry has technique. Stories ride the night like swallows. Someone tells of an earlier festival when ivy crept overnight across a shop front and the owner claimed a sign from the god. Someone else swears the amphory rattle when the first grapes blush in the fields. A third hums a rumor that an actor once walked blindfolded through a maze of wine cups and never spilled a drop. You're seasoned enough now to file these under edible myths, not provable, not useless. The dancers arc toward a small climax. A whirl, a catch, a bow, and the crowd answers with a wave of sound that keeps its promise to the neighbors asleep 2 streets over. Release, without rudeness, is a Roman superpower on well-run nights. The priest lifts a shallow cup and pours a sip onto the earth libation, because joy for humans borrows from joy, for the ground that grows the vines. You love that celebration anchored, not drifting. A question floats to you from someone wearing a satyr mask that's more smile than snarl. What does your city do to remember it's alive? Don't answer quickly. Let the drum walk your pulse a few more steps. Let the perfume from your wrist, myrrh you met in the baths, mix with resin from the torches. Maybe your city keeps a summer evening market where strangers compare peaches. Maybe a family sings a silly birthday song every time a recipe works. Maybe your friends play cards on Thursdays until the kettle forgives them. You offer a quiet example about a park where people bring lanterns and exchange stories when the cicadas start. The mask nods approval, like a teacher who wanted that homework all along. Roman knights carry risk in the footnotes, the Senate's wary letter, the magistrate's brow, the half-remembered scandal from a generation back. But most evenings, like this land where they aim relief, that doesn't undo the city in the morning. It helps that the neighborhood knows itself. A fishmonger's wife claps the offbeat perfectly. A retired soldier guards the outer ring with arms crossed, a doorkeeper for joy. A teenage scribe recites 2 clean lines of verse and looks like he just passed an exam. The room didn't announce. Community feels handmade. The procession reverses slowly, as if the street itself were a ribbon being rolled back onto its spool. Lamps return to doorways. Ivy crowns slide to foreheads, then wrists, then necks. Music lingers in the alleys like steam after the caldarium. You catch the edge of a Saturnalia comparison. Different festival, different winter mischief. But tonight's vine belongs to Bacchus, and you keep the categories tidy because Romans respect a correct label the way cooks respect clean knives. Back at your host's door, the doorkeeper raises his chin in the universal language of good evening so far. You answer with a palm press to the lintel, a little private vow of thanks to wood and hinges that shepherded you between polite dinner and polite frenzy. Inside the lamps, Steady the couches, remember your elbow, and the room smiles at the sight of ivy in your hair. You haven't abandoned the etiquette you practiced. You've taught it to dance. Before you recline again, you rinse your fingers in a bowl scented with rosemary and citrus. The fragrance snaps your attention like a soft command. Rome excels at this on-ramp, off-ramp, a rhythm that makes looseness storied rather than sloppy. You breathe, you sit. You glance at the person 2 cushions away, who also has a few ivy leaves tucked behind one ear, and you share the small grin of travelers who visited the same shrine and came back carrying only what they meant to bring. A drum beat, now faint and friendly, fades down the street. Someone raises a cup for a simple toast, not to excess, not to rule, but to the difficult art of elastic evenings. The room agrees in a murmur that sounds suspiciously like contentment, and the night, which earlier promised surprise, keeps one last promise. It returns you to yourself with a pocket full of music and the steady feeling that joy, when coached well, wakes a city rather than wearing it out. You start noticing how kindness here has columns and cornices. Power wears hospitality like a well-tailored cloak, and you learn to read its seams without tugging at them. A toast rises. It sounds like gratitude, but it functions like a vote. The host names a brave governor, dealing well with a river that refused to mind its banks. The room hums approval, and in that hum sits tomorrow's endorsement. You clink gently because noise isn't the point. Alignment is. The Romans invented plenty of devices. The quiet public, I see you disguised as a goblet, might be their most portable one. Patronage breathes through the cushions. The same clients who lined the atrium at dawn for the sportula, that little box of help that keeps loyalty warm, now recline 2 cushions away, upgraded from cue to chorus. The host is writing sentences in People, a rising lawyer placed where a senator must hear his clever line. A grain merchant within smiling distance of adels who can make inspections kinder. A poet with a gift for flattering metaphors, positioned to lend shine without glare. Every placement is both hospitality and scaffolding. Ever attend a modern dinner where the place cards looked innocent, but the seating solved 3 problems? Rome nodded first. A servant slips behind you with a refill, and far more importantly, a whisper. Tomorrow at the Forum early. That's the actual invitation tonight, after the food, after the laughter. Because what looks like a party doubles as a document draft with better lighting. Cicero campaigned this way, not only with speeches, but with suppers that braided reputations like ropes. Maecenas perfected the art under Augustus, turning dinners into cultural irrigation poets. Watered politics weeded, and the empire's image pruned with tact. You picture Virgil polishing a line near a bowl of pears, and you spot how softly history sometimes pours itself. The host tests the room's climate with a small weather vane disguised as a joke. If only the Tiber would show the manners of our sauces. Laughter agrees to nothing and everything at once. If a magistrate in earshot plans a new embankment, he receives encouragement without minutes being taken. Power prefers nods to signatures when candles burn. Watch for micro appointments. When the Magister Bibendi was chosen earlier, ratio looked like palate management. In fact, you witnessed a signal. Choose the veteran official with a taste for restraint, and you say steady hands still steer. Choose the dazzling equestrian with bolder pores, and you hint that new horses will be harnessed soon. Everyone pretends it's about tannin. Everyone hears the message anyway. Rivalries use table manners as fencing rules. Two men, not on speaking terms tonight, share a platter with choreographed civility. One compliments the glaze, the other returns a proverb, and a slave's steady hand between them might be the narrow bridge that keeps a commercial treaty from wobbling tomorrow. If you think that's too delicate, remember the peacock tongue joke from earlier. Even absurd bites can carry policy when a city eats its metaphors. Emperors rewrite etiquette simply by entering a room, which is why emperors are sparing with entrances if they're clever. Augustus popularizes measured luxury, not stingy, not reckless, so that moderation reads as leadership rather than lack of funds. He sits just close enough to conversation to season it, not to swallow it. Nero, in contrast, treats stage and table as interchangeable rooms and teaches everyone what it costs when the spotlight refuses to blink. Domitian's famous turbot. Yes, the fish that forced a council shows how a single extravagant object can recruit the state into a dinner problem. Pro tip: if your platter choice requires legislation, you're writing satire with cookware. Livia poised as a scale embodies the quiet power of correction. A word here, a chin tilt there, and a cousin's unfortunate habit becomes a rumor that gently removes him from harm and from the guest list. Behind many balanced evenings sits an invisible audit, the empress, a wife, a senior matron, trimming vanity the way a gardener trims laurel snip smile never announced the cut. You wonder who runs the true guest list tonight. The smoothness suggests a hand that never spills. The economics of favor translate into tiny edible policies. When olives from a certain estate appear on more than one tray, the room receives the headline, "The host backs that harvest." When the honey arrives from a beekeeper in a town that petitioned for tax relief, the trays whisper, "The petition has sympathizers." Food isn't just consumed here, it's broadcast. Ask yourself, in your city, which snacks function like press releases. Alliances form in motion, not speeches. The host strolls a short orbit between couches and spends 18 heartbeats at each stop, long enough to warm, short enough to avoid any single group crowning itself. He deposits one sentence per orbit. See you at dawn. Send the letter. Your nephew reads well. Each sentence plants an appointment like a seed. Each seed expects water in the morning. Tomorrow's forum will look spontaneous. Tonight's dining room built spontaneity like a stage set. The philosopher is still here, and his presence is policy too. He keeps extravagance within photogenic limits. Yes, but he also offers the host a shield. We had a philosopher, therefore the evening was thoughtful, a line that survives scrutiny better than we had a second boar staged to burst with sausages. Seneca the Younger occasionally complains about dinners that worship spectacle, then describes them in prose. So delicious even their owners would blush. You suspect the city's secret, a dose of moral spice preserves the banquet longer than extra honey ever could. Gifts drift in disguised as courtesies. A small silver salt cellar, admired, becomes via a gentle protest, and a gentler insistence, a loan that accidentally learns to stay. A poet recites 4 lines on the household lararium and leaves behind a verse that will be quoted for years. Reciprocity is the currency. Coin is only the receipt. You commit to writing a letter tomorrow that praises the city's water inspectors in earshot of someone who needs your handwriting. The table taught you that service can sit on a cushion and still count. Power also uses absence. A name not heard tonight becomes louder by midnight. Where is hangs in the air like a light curtain and invites two competing answers, unwell or unwise. The host will let the question live exactly one day, then either visit with a fruit basket or schedule someone else into that person's usual cushion. Rome dislikes vacuum. Networks dislike loose ends. Sometimes appetite tests loyalty. The host offers you a rare wine he hopes you'll enjoy, but quite understands if it's not your taste. The right answer is gratitude with restraint. That middle road the city paves, even on plates, praise the vineyard. Sip with care and mention the lighter Alban, as if it too owes a debt to the host's judgment. Someone once drank the emperor's cup too deeply and woke up famous for the wrong reasons. The story circulates like a soft guardrail. You catch a small theater near the door. A client presents a modest gift, a carved intaglio ring to the host in thanks for an introduction. The host deflects with charm and places the ring on a tray that will make a round of the room, pausing to let certain eyes read the cameo. Recognition flows outward, then circles back. The next day, the client will discover 2 new letters of recommendation already drafted. If this feels like email done with olives and firelight, that's because it is. What about enemies? Rome prefers to domesticate them. A known rival arrives late, is placed comfortably but not centrally, and receives a story tailored to include his virtues, so that his exit requires grace. He will leave scene not celebrated, which for tonight is the point. Disarming with inclusion is an old trick. It keeps daggers rhetorical. A quiet question for you, because rooms like this train questions as well as appetites. Which role tonight would you choose if you had to trade your cushion? Poet, with gentle thunder, cupbearer, with perfect timing. Philosopher, with one raised brow. Each has power in a different key. Pick one in your head. Notice how your posture changes as you picture it. That's the Roman lesson. Identity is partly furniture arrangement. As the lamps are trimmed, the host releases one final current into the water, a promise of congiaria public gifts, soon maybe oil or grain, with a date that happens to align with a vote. No decree proclaims it, no herald strides through. A whisper becomes a plan, becomes a cue, becomes approval numbers carved in stone 3 months later. The city will call it generosity. The night calls it follow through. When you rise, you realize the dinner didn't end. It folded into tomorrow. The compliments rehearsed themselves into toasts. The toasts shaped errands. The errands will align into policy with the same soft inevitability that sauce is aligned a dozen flavors back in part 4. You glance at your empty cup, still fragrant, and you understand the formula. Appetite sets the table. Arrangement writes the chapter. Patronage signs it in a hand that smells faintly of myrrh and fresh bread. The bill arrives without parchment. It arrives as a clink, a scrape, a hill that didn't exist last season, and now rises behind a warehouse like an accidental monument. Rome pays for pleasure in shard shells and stories that accountants repeat with a sigh. Start with what breaks. Amphorae do not come home again. Olive oil rides in from Baetica, stamped with tidy Tituli Picti origin weight inspector. And after the last slick drop warms a pan or a lamp, the vessel is sacrificed to gravity. Multiply one dinner by 1,000, then by a year, then by a century, and you get a mountain with a Spanish aftertaste, a slope of smashed clay that future ages will call Monte Testaccio. It is not a metaphor. It is a ledger you can climb. You picture tonight's crater of wine and understand that behind every poured cup stands a boy with forearms like rope and a pile of shards that remembers his shift better than the city does. Shells tell the same tale in a brighter register. Oysters from Lucrinus arrive, laughter applauds, and the middens grow chalk-white drifts behind kitchens. Evidence that appetite loves the sea while pretending it loves the coast equally. Add bones, fish spines, fruit pits, the sticky remains of moretum, and mustard alec sludge, scraped from the bottom of garum vats. Waste becomes biography, and biography needs storage. If you've ever walked past a stadium the morning after a concert and watched the cleanup crews earn immortality by noon, you know the feeling. Rome invented that shift and paid it with bread and quiet gratitude. Now, the human line items. Slaves stoke the hypocaust. Fetch snow for cooling carry trays large enough to be small tables. They will sleep tired, and the braziers will not offer back pain a pension. Cooks taste an evening's fortune, one spoon at a time, and persuade timing to obey heat costs wood. Wood costs hillsides. Hillsides cost time that never returns. The host smiles as he should. A steward behind the curtain tallies. Imported pepper hums like a luxury car idling in the vestibule. Myrrh burns gently into the lararium's breath. Saffron stains shirts and budgets. Do the numbers ever bite back? The city files answers under Lex laws with tidy names you hear like refrains. Long before tonight in 215 BCE, the Lex Appia told Roman women to curb displays of gold and keep their carriages off city streets, except for holy days, a wartime economy turned moral lecture. In 195 BCE, it was repealed after a street debate loud enough to make Livy grin in his pages. The point float's forward restriction feels righteous until peace returns and the market remembers its tricks. Later, the Lex Orcia, 181 BCE, tried to limit guest counts. The Lex Fania 161 BCE capped banquet spending by day and occasion. The Lex Didia 143 BCE extended the rules beyond Rome as if excess were a provincial weed needing central pruning. You can almost hear the magistrate clearing his throat over a platter. Fine talk, gentlemen. Please keep your menus on a leash. Did anyone obey? Some did, as much as people obey speed limits when a cousin's driveway is in sight. Clever hosts learn to distribute costs, call a course, a gift count. A fish as 3 samples move, a feast to a festival, and let piety handle the invoice. Julius Caesar later tightened things. Augustus tuned them again, frowning at purple stripes that shouted louder than their careers, and at pearls that told stories bigger than their wearers. The city consented mostly, and then threw Saturnalia each winter to exhale. How many rules does a city need to stage moderation? Answer as many as it takes for the next generation to forget why they were written and write them again. Waste is also fashion's shadow. Tyrian purple requires a tragic number of murex shells cracked, boiled the tiniest vein of dye. teased out like a secret, so each senatorial stripe trails a supply chain that once clattered on a Phoenician shore. You run a finger along someone's hem and feel the cost without asking the price. Gold thread glitters like a rumor. Silk murmurs that Parthia and China are closer than maps admit, and Pliny in your head worries about silver running east as if coins were small fish that slip the net. What about the diners who can't afford the game? They orbit. Some eat well by proximity staff, share leftovers. Clients receive a basket the morning after street vendors remix scraps into stews that taste like gratitude. Others watch the spectacle and convert it into talk, which is the currency affordable to everyone and accepted in every forum. You hear Marshall's wry tone in a neighbor's remark about vinegar for the back row and better wine where the cushions are thick. Satire is the poor man's ledger that can't be audited. Debt can wear a laurel. A rising equestrian funds a season of dinners on optimistic credit and wakes to find social interest compounding faster than grain in a good year. A merchant advances spice to a would-be statesman who promises contracts later. Later arrives wearing someone else's shoes. Scandals sprout where promises outnumber harvests. Even success has a hangover. Reputations built on lavish tables must be renewed like subscriptions, and renewal costs rise with memory. Ever join a streaming plan during the free month and forget to cancel Rome Smiles? The first peacock is advertising. The fifth is overhead. Clean water and dirty water keep score together. The Cloaca Maxima swallows kitchen runoff, and the city's other realities proving that infrastructure is appetite. Spelled with bricks, an adiel with ambition, inspects markets, finds a butcher for watering meat, praises a fishmonger for honest eyes on his catch, and rides that performance toward votes. Behind his clipboard stands the quieter labor of people who carry waste out where it can forget its name. You admire the efficiency and promise yourself to admire the workers out loud. Every so often, a story rises like steam and fogs the mirror. A gourmet becomes shorthand for excess, a nickname, Apicius. Later writers claim he wandered the world, tasting novelty, and when fortune thinned to what most mortals would call vast wealth, he could not bear the thought of only. Believe the numbers, or discount them. The moral travels anyway. Appetite without horizon forgets to be a companion and tries to be a king. You tuck the warning beside your memory of sauces in part 4. The secret is balance, not denial, and restraint is a spice that prevents rot. Hosts defend their budgets politely. Some cut showpieces and invest in excellence. You can't see crisp accounts, reliable suppliers' kitchens that run on time. Others theatricalize thrift, fresh vegetables and seasoned fish landed that morning. Wine mixed with grace, so the room tastes virtue and doesn't miss gilding. Augustus would approve. Cato the Elder would bristle and then take seconds of cabbage with cumin, because simplicity can taste like authority when served hot. Can laws cure appetite? They can tutor it. The sumptuary edicts teach the city how to talk about limits without hating joy. A sensible rule becomes a story. Remember when so-and-so fined the consul's nephew for too many guests, and stories become custom. And custom keeps more evenings from becoming headlines. You glance at the philosopher's unraised brow and think that too is a law, an eyebrow statute, quiet binding enforced by affection. Look around the edges of the room where bills hide. Lamps drink oil. Wicks must be trimmed and bought. Fabrics will demand laundering by people whose hands crack in winter. Mosaic floors want repairs, one blue tessera at a time. Snow-chilled buckets melt into puddles a boy must mop before someone's sandal performs a comic slide. Luxury is a choir. Maintenance sings the harmony that keeps the melody from sounding silly. Yet the city also recycles. Shards become fill for foundations. Ash enriches gardens. Bones flavor broths that feed staff in the gray hour before dawn. Leftover bread becomes puddings sweetened for children who run errands fast. Citrus peels dry into kindling that smells like a cheerful apology. Waste and prudence have a long marriage noisier in satire than at the curb. Ask yourself a modern question. In Roman light, what's your Monte Testaccio? Is it single-use cups after a music festival? The cardboard peak behind a grocery, the cloud of data humming to keep your videos smooth. Every appetite stacks something somewhere. Recognizing the pile is not a scold, it's good manners. Rome writes its pile in clay and calls it honest. When magistrates wave their laws, they wave at the mirror. Limits exist because desire is talented. The best hosts play along not to game the rules, but to demonstrate art a night that tastes expensive without wearing a crown. A table that flatters the city and wakes with clean books. A reputation that can afford to smile when the adult walks in. You recline, you sip a sensible ratio, and you hear the message delivered in the softest possible voice. Enjoy, but leave the future enough to enjoy you back. Morning smells different after Rome has stayed up too late. Lamps are gone cold. Ash clings like gray lace to bronze, and a faint perfume still floats above the cushions, myrrh roses, and a touch of spilled Falernian that no one dared wipe in time. You wake not to trumpets, but to fragments, petals stuck to sandals, olive pits on mosaic, a cup tipped just enough to tell on itself. If last night was theater, this morning is rehearsals backstage, raw and honest with no applause to hide the seams. Your throat tastes of garum and honey, your hands of oil and salt. A slave pushes open the shutters, and daylight barges in with no sense of courtesy, cutting through last night's shadows, like a magistrate auditing an account book. Rome loves light in the day as much as it loves shadow at night. You blink and remember this is the same room that shimmered with music, now reduced to crumbs, husks, and the quiet embarrassment of empty amphorae leaning like drunks in the corner. Philosophers thrive in mornings. Seneca would stroll into this silence and nod smugly, telling you banquets fatten vanity and starve virtue. Epictetus would remind you that appetite should be a servant, not a master. They're not wrong, but their voices sometimes sound louder when your head aches. You sip watered vinegar, Posca the soldier's everyday drink, and understand why moderation looks heroic in daylight. The feast is memory now. What remains is the measure of what it cost and what it left. Ashes whisper Rome's contradictions. Monte Testaccio grows while philosophers scold. Yet both survive, one in clay shards, the other in sentences copied by schoolboys. What will be remembered? The waste or the warning? Perhaps both. You recall the lex fanae and lex didia. Those sumptuary laws meant to leash luxury, and you smirk because the shards behind the warehouse prove appetite knows how to slip collars. But the laws themselves tell us the city was always aware of its excess always trying to choreograph restraint without canceling the music. A Christian deacon passes the doorway cloak plain face calm. His words gather more listeners these days, promising a kingdom where feasts serve the hungry first. He doesn't speak tonight's language of oysters and purple stripes. He speaks breadwater and justice. To some, it sounds like poverty. To others, like prophecy. You catch yourself wondering, when future ages sift this rubble, will they marvel at the oysters or the sermons, which will echo longer the sauce or the scripture? The host emerges robed simpler, now eyes rimmed, but smile polished. He greets each lingering guest with the same warmth he offered last night, as if performance is a virtue in itself. Behind him, slaves sweep fold, rinse scrape, carrying away evidence while leaving reputation intact. Rome's talent is this transforming aftermath into continuity, so the city never admits to endings, only to pauses. Outside streets stir, bread sellers shout, mule bells clink, children chase hoops. To the passerby, last night's feast might as well be rumor. But you, who saw couches recline like thrones, who tasted empire in pepper and mullet, who watched ivy crowns trade hands in Bacchic rhythm, you know better. The city hides its excess behind everyday noise, yet every stone remembers. Look at Pompeii's graffiti crude jokes about lovers, inscriptions of wine tabs, scratches of names boasting I was here. The eruption froze them, and centuries later, voices still whisper what the morning after looked like. The morning teaches you scale. A single dinner costs a hill of shards, a squad of aching backs, a scroll of moral essays, and a bundle of stories, both admiring and scandalized. Multiply it by thousands, and you glimpse why philosophers warn, why magistrates legislate, why moralists scrawl, why new faiths bloom. Appetite is never just food. It's Rome rehearsing what kind of city it wants to be, and arguing with itself at the same table. You step into sunlight, skin still scented faintly of oil, and smoke stomach caught between satisfaction and regret. A street urchin calls a joke at your toga's wrinkle. You laugh because laughter is lighter than memory. The forum ahead buzzes already with yesterday's alliances sealed in wine, and tomorrow's schemes disguised as errands. The triclinium has emptied, but its politics walk upright, now disguised as ordinary men in sandals. And you, still tasting both honey and ash, understand why historians keep circling these nights. They're not footnotes. They're headlines written in sauce, smoke, and rumor. Rome's pleasures taught the empire how to live loudly, how to blur the line between generosity and vanity, how to turn appetite into policy. They also taught the world how to question that noise, how to seek balance, how to imagine tables where bread feeds more than pride. So, you walk slow and thoughtful past shutters opening and voices greeting the day. Above you, the Capitol catches dawn like a crown. Below you, streets hide shards that once carried Falernian mullet honey oysters, even flamingo. Rome is still Rome, rehearsing its balance between feast and famine, spectacle and sermon. And you guest and witness carry the aftertaste of both indulgence and reflection, knowing that long after the couches rot, long after amphorae crumble, the stories of how Rome fed itself and nearly fed on itself will still be passed like a cup that never empties.